This is StoryLink Radio. The professional storytellers at StoryLink Radio have been around for a long time. The Irish knew storytellers by the name Shawnee. We are committed to bringing stories to life through the spoken word as in traditional oral storytelling. We present stories of many genres: ancient myths and legends, short stories, full-length novels, science fiction, high fantasy, philosophy, traditions, classics, drama, fiction, nonfiction, romance, theater, ghosts and haunts, stories of the strange, and much, much more. Our stories may be drawn from contemporary sources or from some dusty, near-forgotten tome. Regardless, it is a treat like no other to listen to stories and tales presented in a live format with the emotion and feeling a true professional storyteller brings, conjuring up images of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy. So join us at StoryLink Radio and let us be your Shawnee for a time. Our stories are presented before a live audience, then recorded for the StoryLink Radio podcast for your on-demand listening pleasure. Please visit StoryLinkRadio.com for show notes, to find out how to join our live audience, and for lots of free stuff, including free audiobooks and much more. Visit www.StoryLinkRadio.com. Tonight we present Scottish Legends. It was a time of primal chaos, a time when the earth was new and undefined. Arid deserts and black bubbling volcanoes covered by swirling clouds of gases scarred the grim visage of the newborn world. It was, as yet, the time of the great void. Then, into that oblivion from the dull, dark heavens there came a trickle of water. First one drop, then another and another, until finally there gushed a mighty torrent down upon the earth. The divine waters from heaven flooded downwards and soaked into the arid dirt, cooled the volcanoes which turned into gray granite mountains, and life began to spring forth across the earth. The dark reddened skies grew light and blue. From the darkened soil there grew a tree. Welcome, Dagmar. A tree tall and strong. Danu, the divine waters from heaven, nurtured and cherished this great tree, which became the sacred oak named Baal. Of the conjugation of Danu and Baal, there dropped two giant acorns. Now the first acorn was male. From it sprang the Dagda, the good god. The second seed was female. From it there emerged Brigantu, or Bridget, the exalted one. And then the Dagda and Bridget gazed upon one another in wonder, for it was their task to wrest order from the primal chaos to the people, and to people the earth with the children of Danu, the mother goddess whose divine waters had given them life. So there, by the divine waters of Danu, from where those waters rose and flooded through the now fertile green valleys of the earth, eastwards towards the distant sea, the Dagda and Bridget settled. And they called the great course of eastward rushing water after the mother goddess, which is Danuvius, whose children still know it as the mighty Danube. And 4 great bright cities they built there on its broad banks, in which the children of Danu would live and thrive. The 4 cities were Thalius, Gorius, Phineus, and Murius. But of course you knew that. The Dagda became their father, thus humankind called him the father of the gods. And Bridget became the wise one, exalted in learning, and much did she imbibe from the mighty Danu and from Bile, the sacred oak. She was hailed as the mother of healing, of craftsmanship, of poetry. Indeed, she excelled in all knowledge, much as our own Caledonia. She showed her children that true wisdom was only to be garnered from the feet of Danu, the mother goddess, and so only to be found at the water's edge. Those who gathered such knowledge also paid deference to Baal, the sacred oak. Because they were not allowed to speak his holy name, they called the oak Drau, and those learned in such knowledge were said to possess oak, Dru, knowledge, vid, and thus were known as the Druids, or the Druids. Now the knowledge of the children of Danu grew, and each of their 4 great cities prospered. And Thalius, they held a sacred stone called the Liafael, or the Stone of Destiny, which when a righteous ruler set foot on it would shout with joy. And Gorius, where Urius, the noble of the noble nature dwelt, they held a mighty sword called Retaliator, fashioned before the time of the gods themselves, and which Urius presented to Luglamfara, who became the greatest warrior among the gods. In the city of Phineas, they held a magic spear called the Red Javelin, which once cast would find its enemy no matter where he hid. And Mureus, in the city of Mureus, they held the Cauldron of Plenty, from which the Dagda could feed entire nations, and it still would not be empty. Now for many aeons, the children of Danu grew and prospered in their beautiful cities. And then one day the Dagda, the father of the gods, and Brigid, the exalted one, called their children to them. You have tarried here long enough. The earth needs to be peopled and needs your wisdom to advise and direct them, so that they may live lives of virtue and merit. Our mother, Danu, has directed you to move towards a place where the bright sun vanishes each evening. Well, why should we go there? Demanded Nuada, the favourite son of the Dagda. Because it is your destiny, replied Brigid, and you, Nuada, shall lead your brothers and sisters and their children. The land that you shall come to will be called Inishfel, the island of destiny. There shall you abide until your destiny is fulfilled. If it is all destiny, said another of the Dagda's son named Ogma, then we shall accept it. Now Ogma was the most handsome of the children of Danu. From his long curly hair, his long curly strawberry blonde hair, the rays of the sun shone, and he was called Ogma, Ogma Gran Anyek, of the sunny countenance. To him fell the gift of honey words, of poetry, of languages, and he it was who devised how man could write in a form of calligraphy which was named after him as Ogum. Brigid smiled at her eager children. I am allowed to give you one word of warning. When you reach Inishfal, you will find another people who claim the island of destiny as their own. They are the children of Damnu, who is the sister of our mother, Danu. Ah, but beware, my children, for Damnu is not as Danu. For each sister is the inverse of the other, you see, as winter is to summer. Well then, Nuada asked, should we not take something to defend ourselves with, lest the children of Damnu fight us for the possession of Inishfal? The Dagda gazed at them kindly and replied, You might take the 4 great treasures of the cities of Phileas, Gorius, Phineas, and Mureus. And so the children of Danu took the treasures, and they went to the mountains overlooking the headwaters of Danuvius, the divine waters from heaven, and ascended in great cloud which bore them westwards to Inishfal, the island of destiny. And among them were 3 beautiful young sisters, who were the wives of the sons of Ogma. Their names were Banba, Fotla, and Eile, and each sister nurtured an ambition that this new land of Inishfal would one day be named after her. The night wrapped her darkened mantle over Maigturith, which is called the Plain of Towers, which lay in the west of the land of Inishfal. On each side of the great plain, separated by the river Eunice, myriads of small campfires glowed in the gloom. 2 armies had gathered for combat. 7 years had passed since the children of Danu had landed in their cloud on the shores of the island of destiny. They had fought initially with a strange race of people called the Furbolg, who challenged their right to rule in the island of destiny. These they had met at the pass of Belgalton, and the conflict went on for 4 days. And in that conflict there came forth a champion of the Furbolg named Sreng, who challenged Nuada, the leader of the children of Danu, to single combat. Now so strong and mighty was Sreng that, with one sweep of his great sword, he cut off Nuada's right hand. But the Furbolg and their king Jokid were defeated and dispersed. Now Dian Kecht, the god of all physicians, came to Nuada after the battle and fashioned Nuada an artificial hand of silver, so strong and supple that it was little different from the real hand, much like Jaime Lannister's. Thus did Nuada receive his full name, Nuada Augat Melah of the Silver Hand. Because he was maimed, the other children of Danu had to choose another of their number to lead them, for they had been told by Brigid that no one with a blemish must rule them. In choosing a new leader, they made a disastrous choice. As an act of conciliation between themselves and the children of Damnu, they chose Bray, son of Elatha, king of the children of Damnu, who are also known as the Fomori, or those who dwelt beneath the sea. And to further consolidate the alliance, Dian Kecht married Etne, the daughter of the foremost Fomori warrior, named Baelor of the One Eye, later Baelor of the Evil Eye. And the condition was that if Bray did anything which displeased the children of Danu, then he would abdicate and depart in peace. Now those years marked a period of strife. Bray, being a Fomori from under the sea, refused to keep his word, and began to lay heavy burdens on the children of Danu. For a while Bray and the children of Damnu, the children of darkness and evil, dominated the land, and the children of Danu, the children of light and goodness, were helpless and as slaves. And finally, Miak, the son of Diankekt, aided by his sister, the beautiful Ermid, fashioned a new hand of flesh and bone for Nuada. His hand replaced Diankekt's silver one, and now, without blemish, Nuada reclaimed the leadership of the children of Danu. So jealous was Diankekt of his son's achievement that he slew Miak. But that's another story. Nuada chased Bray back to the land of the Fomori, where Bray demanded that Elatha, his father, provide him with an army to punish the children of Danu. And thus, on the plain where the ancient megaliths stood, thrusting their dark granite skywards, Mag Turid, the plain of towers, on the evening of the feast of Samhain, October 31st, the children of Danu faced the children of Damnu in battle. At dawn, the battle commenced. Combats broke out all along the line as Nuada led his warriors, both male and female, against the warriors of Bray and his Fomori. Across the battlefield, the Morrigan, the great queen of battles, with her sisters, Bag the Crow, Nemain the Venomous, and Fi the Hateful, rushed hither and thither with their wailing cries which drove mortals to despair and death. As time passed, Indek, a Fomori warrior, approached Bray and pointed out that whenever the children of Danu were slain, or their weapons broken and destroyed, they would be carried from the field, and shortly after they would appear alive and well again with their weapons intact. Bray summoned his son Ruadan to his side and ordered him to discover the cause of this endless supply of weapons. And then he summoned the son of Indek, a warrior named Otrilak, to discover how the children of Danu, once slain, could come alive again. So tell me, is anybody taking note on all these names? Disguising himself as one of the children of Danu, Ruadan went behind the lines of warriors and came across Gobnu, god of smiths, who had set up a forge to one side of the plain of towers. With Gobnu were Luktain, the god of carpenters, Kledne, the god of bronze workers. As each broken weapon was handed to Gobnu, the smith god gave it 3 blows of his hammer, which forged the head, and Luktain gave the wood 3 blows of his axe, and the shaft was fashioned. Then Kredne fixed the shaft and head together with his bronze nails so swiftly they needed no hammering. Ruadan went back to his father and told him what he had seen. In a rage, Bray ordered his son to kill Gobnu. In the meantime, Otrilak had found a mystic spring on the other side of the plain of towers, at which stood Diankekt, the god of medicine, with his daughter Ermid at his side. Whenever one of the children of Danu were slain, they were brought to the spring, and Diankekt and his daughter plunged the body into the spring, and they re-emerged alive again. In a rage, Bray ordered Otrilak to destroy that healing spring. Ruadan returned to the forge and asked for a javelin from Gobnu, who gave it without suspicion, thinking Ruadan was one of the children of Danu, you see. No sooner was the weapon in his hand than Ruadan turned and cast it at Gobnu. It went clean through the smith god's body. Mortally wounded as he was, Gobnu picked up the spear and threw it back, wounding Ruadan, who crawled away back to his father and died at his feet. The Fomori set up a great keening, which was the first ever heard of the Island of Destiny. Gobnu was also crawled away and came to the spring, where Diankekt and Ermid plunged him in, and emerged healthy and healed. That night, however, Otrilak, son of Indek, and several of his companions came to the spring, and each took a large stone from the bed of a nearby river and dropped it into the spring until they had filled it, and so the healing waters were dispersed. Bray, satisfied that the children of Danu were now mortal, and angered by the death of his son, determined that a pitched battle should be fought. The next morning spears and lances and swords smote against buckler and shield. The whistle of darts and the rattle of arrows and shouting of warriors made it seem as if a great thunder was rolling over the plain of towers. The river of Unius, which cut through the plain, was stopped up, so filled was it with dead bodies. The plain was red with blood, so cruel was the battle. Neither did the children of Danu go away from the battle unscathed. And I must thank Rick for filling that role, because usually when I'm not the storyteller, I'm the one that fills that role for Dag to comment on. But Rick's doing it for me tonight, so thank you, Rick. But I'm sure I'll say something stupid before the night's out. It's my wont, you know. Now to this field of slaughter came Balor of the Evil Eye, son of Björnak, the most formidable of the Fomori champions. He had one great eye, whose gaze was so malevolent that it destroyed whosoever it looked upon. So large and awesome was his eye that it took 9 attendants using hooks to lift the mighty lid to open it for Balor. It happened on the fateful day of battle that Balor came upon Nuada of the Silver Hand, the leader of the children of the Danu, and hard and fierce was this contest. Yet in the end, after shield was shattered, after spear was bent and sword was broken into pieces, was the blood of Nuada that gushed in a never-ending stream into the earth of the island of destiny. And not content in this slaughter, Balor turned upon one of Nuada's beautiful wives, Maka, the personification of battles, goddess of warriors, and slew Maka also. Nor did Dean Kecht have the means to restore life to them now. At the death of their leader, the children of Danu wavered and became fearful. It was then that Luog Lamfara, Lug of the Long Arm, approached the battlefield. Now Lug was the son of Caen, which means enduring one, who was in turn the son of Kente, the god of speech. Now the council of the children of Danu had forbidden him to come to battle, for Lug was all wise and all knowledgeable, and it was thought that his life was too valuable to risk in battle, for his was the wisdom needed to serve mankind. In later centuries he was called by the name of Kargan. Indeed, so wise was Lug that Nuada had let him become the ruler of the children of Danu for 13 days, in order that they might receive his wisdom. Therefore the children of Danu had him imprisoned for his own safety during the battle, with 9 warriors to guard him. But on hearing that Nuada was slain, Lug of the Long Arm escaped his prison and his guards, and leaping into his chariot, he hurried to join his brothers and sisters on the plain of Towers. Bray was standing triumphantly with his Fomori warriors when he saw a great light in the west. "I wonder that the sun is rising in the west today," he muttered, scratching his head. One of the Fomori shamans approached Bray, trembling. "It is not the sun, mighty Bray. The light comes from the countenance of Lug Lamfara. It is his radiance." Now Lug of the Long Arm, with his weapons sheathed, drove his chariots out from the lines of the children of the Danu. Straight he drove up to the tightly packed lines of the Fomori champions. "Where is Balor?" he cried. "Let him who thinks himself a great warrior come forward and be taught the truth." And so the lines of the Fomori parted, and the great figure of Balor of the Evil Eye was seen, seated on a gigantic chair. His one mighty eye was closed. Lug's challenge rang out again. This time Balor heard it and said to his attendants, "Lift up my eyelid, that I may gaze upon this prattling little man." The attendants began to lift Balor's eye with a hook. They stood well out of range, for anyone on whom that eye fell upon would perish immediately. But Lug of the Long Arm was ready. He was ready with a sling, and in it he set a tathlum, a slingshot made of blood mixed with the sand of the swift Amorian Sea. As the lid was lifted, Lug hurled his shot into the eye. It struck it. It went through the brain and out the back of Balor's head. The great Fomorian champion's eye was knocked out and fell on the ground. In its dying glint, thrice 9 companies of Fomori warriors were destroyed, for they saw its malignant gaze. Balor fell screaming to the ground in blindness. A great anxiety fell now on the Fomori. Lug now raised his sword, and the Morrigan set up a paean of victory. "Kings arise to battle!" And so the children of Danu took heart. Echoing the song, they began to move forward. Great was the slaughter now as they pressed back on the children of Damnu. It is said that more Fomori were killed in the plain of Towers than there were stars in the sky or grains of sand on the seashore or snowflakes in the winter. And Lugh came upon Bray, who was fleeing for his life from the battlefield. "Spare my life, Lugh, great conqueror," cried the son of Ilotha, sinking to his knees, for he no longer had the strength nor spirit to fight. Spare me, and I will pay whatever ransom you require." "What ransom?" demanded Lugh, his sword held at the throat of the Fomori leader. "I will guarantee that there will be no shortage of milk from the cows of this land," offered Bray. Lugh then called the children of Danu to him. "What good is that if Bray cannot lengthen the lives of the cows?" they demanded. Now Bray could not grant longer lives, so he offered, "If my life is spared, every wheat harvested in Ishfael will be a good one." "We already have enough good harvest. We need no other guarantees from you." Finally, Bray agreed to instruct the children of Danu as to the best times to plow, and sow, and reap, and for this knowledge which they had not, they spared his life. And when the battle was over, when the Fomori were pursued back into their undersea fortresses, and they accepted the right of the children of Danu to live in peace in the island of destiny, and rule over it as gods and goddesses of goodness and light, the Morrigan went to all the summits of the highest mountains of the island, and on each summit she proclaimed the victory of the gods and goddesses of light and goodness, and she sang in triumph a paean to the mother goddess Danu. "Peace mounts to the heavens, the divine waters descend to earth, and fructifies our lives. Earth lies under the heavens. We are of the earth now, and everyone is strong." And while Danu smiled on the victory of her children, her sister, Damnu, scowled from the depths of the earth, and she chose the goddess Ba the crow, as her mouth to utter a prophecy to Danu and her children. "All life is transitory. Even your children are not immortal, my sister. The time will come when they will be defeated. The time will come when no one will want gods and goddesses to nurture them, when they will be driven into the darkness, like my children have been this day. The time approaches when the summers of Inishfal will be flowerless, when the cows shall be without milk, and the men will be weak, and the women shall be shameless. The seas will be without fish, the trees without fruit, and old men will give false judgments. The judges will make unjust laws, and honor will count for little, as warriors will betray each other and resort to thievery. There will come a time when there will be no more virtue left in this world." Indeed, there came the time when the children of Mil flooded into the island of destiny, and when the children of Danu were driven underground into the hills, which were called the She, and in those mounds they dwelt, the once mighty gods and goddesses, deserted by the very people who they had sought to nourish. The descendants of Mil, who lived in the island of destiny to this day, called the children of Danu the Aishi, the people of the hills. And when even the religion of Mil was forgotten, when the religion of the cross replaced that of the circle, the people simply called the Aishi by the name of fairies. Of the greatest of the gods, the victor of the battle in the plain of Towers, Luglamfara, a god of all knowledge, patron of all arts and crafts, his name is still known today. But as memory of the mighty warrior, the invincible god, has faded, he is known only as Lugh Cromen, little stooping Lugh of the She, relegated to the role of a fairy craftsman. And even as the language in which he was venerated has disappeared, all that is left of the supreme god of the children of Danu is a distorted form of that name, Lugh Cromen, or Leprechaun. That's the Ever-Living Ones, a little introduction to the islands. And now a story more specifically from Scotland called Conall Crog Bui. There once was a warrior who lived on Eire Gael, the seaboard of the Gael, which some now call Argyle. His name was Conall Crogbui, which means Conall of the large yellow hand. Really into hands tonight, aren't they? Maybe Jaime Lannister did have something to do with this. I like Tyrion better anyway. Conall was not only a warrior of some renown, but he was known to be one of the best storytellers of the Fanes, the warrior elite of the kingdom of High Hild Alba, later to be called Scotland. Conall had 3 sons who had just reached the age of choice, but they were unruly lads, and needed more discipline than Conall had ever given them for Conall, it may be said, was often away at sea or engaged in wars. And so his sons were sometimes lacking in sobriety and were impetuous of spirit, too fond of feasting and drinking and visiting Littlefinger's establishments. Now it happened that one day, Conall's 3 sons, after one particular feasting where the wine had circled much too freely, met with the 3 sons of the king of Fotla, in whose kingdom Eragael lay. And a joking remark led to an argument led to a fight, and the fight led to the king of Fotla's eldest son being stretched on the ground, dead. Now Conall Crogbui was summoned to the king's fortress at Dun Calleen, and the king was bitter in his anger. But the king of Fotla was a wise man, and a just one. You know, Rick, he talked about shameless women and weak men. I don't see what good shameless women are if the men are weak. Anyway, the king of Fotla was a wise man and a just one. He finally said, "I do not wish vengeance on ye, nor on your sons for the death of my fine brave lad. Vengeance does not profit anyone. And so I will set the terms for the compensation which you must give for my loss." Conall bowed his head in submission, for compensation was the basis of the law system under which all men lived. "I will pay whatever fine you place on me, my king. Then hear this. I will not pursue vengeance nor demand the souls of your 3 boys. If you will go to the land of the king of Loch Lan and bring me back his famous brown horse." Now the Ichdon, or brown horse, of the king of Lochlan was without peer and had never lost a race. But the king of Lochlan was much attached to it, as you can understand. So Conall reasoned it would be no easy task, for he doubted it could be taken, well, except by war. "Difficult is the request you demand, my king," admitted Conall. "But you are fair, and rather than bring shame and dishonor on my house, I am prepared to lose my own life and the life of my 3 sturdy boys in the pursuit of this matter." "That is well spoken," agreed the king. "For that you may take your 3 sons with you to help you. But if you or they do not return with the horse and remain alive thereafter, my vengeance shall seek you out, no matter what corner of the world you attempt to hide in." "That is understood," Conall agreed. And so Conall returned home with his contrite sons to say farewell to his wife. She was very perturbed when she heard the demands of King Fotla had made. "Better to accept punishment than accept this quest, my lord. It means I will never see you again in this world." Now Conall was much troubled, for he knew that the task was arduous. The next morning he and his sons fitted out their warship, and they set sail for Lochlan, the land of fjords and lochs to the northeast. The ship ploughed the grey leaping waves, whose foam-edged lips threatened to engulf them. At no time did Conall shorten his sail, so that his course was straight and true, through the formidable sea towards the shore of Loch Lan, right past the Iron Islands. His sons sat remorseful in the stern, while Conall, without a word, stood in the bow, resigned to whatever fate the gods would bring him. Ashore in Lochlan, Conall asked a passer-by to direct him to the fortress of the king and point out where he might find the Tig Osta, the tavern. At this tavern, Conall asked the innkeeper if he had any rooms, for he and his sons needed rest that night. They were the only guests, it turned out. Over wine that evening, Conall grew confidential with the innkeeper, who, being curious, as innkeepers are about their guests, wondered what they were doing in Lochlan. Conall told him that he and his sons had fallen out with the king of Fotla, and indeed one of his sons had killed the king's son. Nothing would please the king of Fotla more than if he and his sons would bring back the fabulous Iachdon, the brown horse of the King of Lachlan. Perhaps you could tell me where I might find the Yochdon and whether I might purchase him from the King of Lachlan. You would be well paid for such a service, innkeeper. The innkeeper roared with laughter. Oh, I'm sorry for your troubles that you find yourself in, stranger. Oh, you've come here to seek a thing impossible. The King of Lachlan will never sell his brown horse. The only way to be taken from him is by stealth. I will pretend I've not heard what you said, provided I'm compensated for my deafness. In annoyance, Connell had to pay the innkeeper 3 pieces of gold in order that he did not go to the King of Lachlan and tell him right out. So Connell went out the next morning, and he fell in with the King of Lachlan's miller. Now it turned out that the miller was a greedy man, and after Connell he had talked a while, Connell said, "For 5 pieces of gold, I'd put you to your proposition. Every day you and your servants take sacks of bran to the King of Lachlan's stable for the feeding of his horses." "True enough," said the miller. "Then put me and my sons into the sacks and carry us into the stable and leave us." The miller rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "It's a strange request," he observed. "You look very heavy." See, he was a miller light, not a miller heavy, you see. Connell clinked the gold coins in his hands. The miller's eyes sparkled. Without more ado, Connell and his 3 sons were placed in the sacks, and the miller and his servants carried the sacks up to the King of Lachlan's stable and deposited them inside. And then they went away. Now, after a while, Connell and his sons emerged. "We'll have to wait until nightfall," Connell told them in a whisper. "So we'll make hiding places for ourselves within this stable, just in case the king's men search it at any time." So they sought out hiding places for themselves. Dusk came, and Connell and his sons approached the stall of the Yochdon. Now this brown horse was an intelligent creature, as many horses are, particularly pipe-smoking black ones with horns on their heads. As soon as they began to approach him, he kicked up his back legs and began to whinny and cry. In the castle, the King of Lachlan heard the noise. "What ails my brown horse?" he cried, turning to his mother, who was supping with him. "Little can I tell you of that, my son. Tell your servants to go to the stable and find out what's amiss. What do I know?" The King of Lachlan turned to his servants and said, "Go down to the stable. See what's wrong with my brown horse." The servants rushed to the stable. When Connell and his sons heard them coming, they hid in the places they had prepared for themselves. So the servants went inside and looked around and reported back to the King of Lachlan that they had seen nothing amiss at all. "Perhaps the brown horse is simply skittish." "Very well," said the king. "Be about your business. Let us continue with our feasting, mother." Now after a while, Connell and his sons came out of their hiding places and approached the Yochdon. The outcry now was 7 times louder than before, for as I mentioned, it was an intelligent horse. Even the king's mother felt something was wrong. So the King of Lachlan turned to his servants. "There's something wrong in the stables. Go and bring me word of what it is this instant." The servants rushed to the stable, but Connell and his sons had already disappeared into their hiding places. The servants searched diligently, but did not discover them. They returned again and reported that nothing was amiss. So the king ordered the feasting to resume. Once more, Connell and his sons arose from their hiding places and approached the Yochdon. Yet again did the horse make such an outcry that all the corners of the king's palace became alarmed. "Perhaps some dark wizard is attacking us then," cried out the King of Lachlan's mother, who had a great fear of wizards. The king stood up. "There's no other possibility than that someone is in that stable who has evil designs on my brown horse." This time he ordered his servants to accompany him. Now when Connell and his sons heard the King of Lachlan coming to the stable, they went and hid themselves once more. The King of Lachlan entered and stood at the stable door and surveyed the place. The Yochdon stood in his stall, trembling. "Let us be wary," said the king, "for I believe that there are men within this stable. We must search them out." Now the King of Lachlan, who was called Sigurdsson, was a clever man. Otherwise he would not have been a king over such a fierce people as the men of Lachlan in the first place, whose ships were constantly raiding the 7 seas. He looked at the stable floor, and his keen eye picked out a stranger's footprint. He followed the footprints to the corner of the stable, the very corner where Connell himself was now hiding. The King of Lachlan stood, hands on hip, and chuckled. "I spy the shoes of a warrior of the Gael. Distinctive are they as the colour of a man's hair. Who stands hiding there? Tell me, or will you die without a name? This angered Connell a little, and he stepped forward. My name is Connell of Airlegale. Can it be Connell Clogbue, who is lurking in my stable and making my Yock Dawn nervous? Asked the King of Lachlan in good humour. I've heard many stories of your courage and ability, but none suggest you would come like a thief in the night to a man's stables to frighten his prize horse. And the blush of shame came to Connell's cheeks, and he saw that he was surrounded by the swords of the king's bodyguard on all sides, so he stepped forward. It is I, Sigurdsson, who is here indeed. Explain the reason to me. Connell came out and told the King of Lachlan why and how he had come to his kingdom. So you see, Sigurdsson, that dire necessity forced me here. Now I am under your hospitality and, hopefully, your pardon. You did not come to me first and ask for the Yock Dawn. Why not? I knew that I would not acquire the brown horse by asking. True enough. We'll talk more about this. But first, the cause of all this trouble must be surrendered to me. Ask your sons to step forward. Connell told his 3 sons to come out from their hiding places. They were taken prisoner and escorted by the king's guard to be fed and watched over during the night. You'll be fed this night, and tomorrow at dawn, you 3 will be hanged. I shall hang you, for you are the cause of the trouble you have placed on your father's shoulders by your insobriety and lack of thought. Then the King of Lachlan placed his hand on Connell's arm and led him to his feasting hall, where his mother was awaiting word of what had happened. The King of Lachlan introduced Connell and then gave him food and wine. Now, my old enemy, Connell of the Large Yellow Hand, let us consider this matter closely. I shall have your 3 sons hanged tomorrow for attempting to steal my horse to buy their lives from the King of Fotla. I could send them back to the King of Fotla without the brown horse. Either way, your 3 sturdy sons will be hanged. Why not hang me instead? I led them here in an attempt to save their lives. What reason to hang you, Connell? You have already absolved yourself in this matter. Necessity made you come here, and I forgive you for that necessity. But faced whichever way you turned with your son's death, can you tell me if you were ever in a more difficult situation? Now, Connell was a proud man. I was, and in many such difficulties have survived them all. Sigurdsson slapped his thigh and bellowed with laughter. If you can tell me of a more difficult situation which you overcame, I will release the youngest of your sturdy lads. Now, Connell was not a stupid man, and so he asked for a drink of wine, and he thought rapidly. Agreed. Tell on, then, Connell, invited the King of Lachlan. And this is where we find out the power of stories. When I was a young lad, my father was then living. We had a great estate and a large herd of cattle. Among the yearling cows there was one who had just calved. My father told me to go to the meadow where she had calved and bring her and the calf home to a warm stable, you see. It was cruel winter time, and a shower of icy snow had fallen. I went to the meadow, and I dug out the cow and her calf and began the journey back. But now snow began to fall again, and so I found a herdsman's boffin. We went into this cabin to await the easing of the snowstorm. So there we were, when the door opened, and in came a family of cats. Not 1 cat, but 10 cats. And clear so it was that they were one and the same family. Now, one among these cats was very big and red-gray color of a fox. It had but 1 very big eye in its head. The others sat around the big cat and started a fearsome caterwaul. Away from this place, cats, I cried. I have no likings for your companies, nor the noise you make. The large cat turned to me and spoke, and I had understanding of its words. We shall not leave this place, for we have come to sing you a cronin, Connell Clogbue. I was surprised that it knew my name, and more surprised when they began to sing me a cronin. Now, a cronin, as you know, is a croon, a dirge, often likened to the purring of cats. Thus Connell continued to recite his story to the King of Lachlan. I sat amazed as those cats crooned to me. When they had finished, the one-eyed cat said, Now, Connell Clogbue, you must pay the fee for such a song as we cats have sung to ye. I was further surprised, but it is true a bard must be paid, even the bard of the cat people. I have nothing to pay your fee with, I confessed, unless you take this newborn calf. Now I had meant this as a jest, but no sooner were the words out of my mouth than the cat sprang forth with the calf, and the beast did not last long between their talons and sharp teeth. It was even tastier than venison. So I said to them, "Away with you now, cats, for I have no liking for your company nor your songs, oh dear, oh dear." But the great one-eyed fox-colored cat said, "We have come to make a cronan for you, Coddle, and make it we will." And the cats gathered round and sang their cronan. "Now pay our fee, for our bards may curse as they may praise," said the one-eyed cat. "Tiresome is this. I have nothing to pay your fee save the cow which now stands here." "Suitable enough," said the one-eyed cat, and no sooner was it said than the cats fell on the cow, and it did not last long between them. "Away with you now, cats. I have no liking for your company, nor your songs, nor your devouring of honest people's cows." "Yet we have come here to sing you a third cronan," replied the one-eyed cat, "and sing it we must." And they sat in a semicircle, and they crooned their dirge to me. And then the one-eyed cat said, "Now pay our fee, for we may sing satire as well as the cronan, and satires may raise blemishes on the skin and cause you to suffer the affliction of those accursed." "But I have nothing to reward you with at all, for you have had everything I can give you." And then the caterwauling started. "Pay us, pay us, pay us the fee, pay us our reward, pay us, pay us." "I can give you nothing." Then the one-eyed cat said, "If you have nothing but yourself, then we find yourself acceptable." And the cats began to approach me with slavering jaws and blood on their whiskers. In truth, I leapt for the window which was framed in rowan, and through it I went, and down to the hazel woods beyond. I was swift and strong, and my fear lent me courage. Yet I heard the torrent, the rushing noise of wind, as the cat sprang after me, and I knew I had not long. I reached the woods and found a rowan tree, and I climbed up and up and up into it until I was hidden from the ground. Below me, the wailing cats started to search through the woods. However, the rowan hid me. Soon the cats grew tired, and one to another they called, and soon gathered below the rowan. "We are tired. We shall return home," cried out one. "We'll never find him." Just then the big one-eyed cat came along and stared right up at me. "It is lucky for you, brothers, that I have one eye that sees more clearly than all of your eyes together. There is Coddle, up in that tree." Now one of the cats began to climb the rowan tree, and as I sat in it, I saw a loose branch with a sharpened end. So I grabbed this, and I stabbed down at the cat and transfixed it. "Oh!" cried the one-eyed cat. "Alas for that! I cannot lose any more of my tribe. But we must exact our fee for the cronan we sang." The cat sat and thought a moment. Then it said to the others, "Gather round the tree, begin to dig out its roots, so the tree will fall." And this they did, and soon the tree was swaying as they revealed its roots and began to topple with me in it. So scared was I that I gave forth a great shout. Connell paused in his storytelling for so long that King Lachlan urged him to continue. "Well," Sigurdsson, continued Connell, "there was a druid in those woods, with 12 acolytes, and he heard my cry. 'That soul is the sound of a man in extremity, and I cannot do anything but reply to it.' One of his acolytes said, 'Do not go, for it might be a trick of the wind. Let us wait until the shout comes again.' They waited. When I gave my next cry of alarm, the druid affirmed his intention. The druid and his acolytes came towards the tree. It was then that the cats gnawed through another root, and the tree fell with a crash, me holding on to a branch for dear life. It was then I shouted for a third time. The druid and his acolytes came to the spot and saw how the cats had severed the tree and were closing in on me. Each of them carried a hazel wand. They took their wands and they ran to the cat people. The cats, not being able to confront a druid's hazel wand, all took to their heels." Connell paused and smiled. "That, O King of Lachlan, is surely a more dangerous situation than facing the death of my 3 sturdy sons, no? My being torn to pieces by the cats is more dangerous for me than seeing my sons hanged tomorrow." The King of Lachlan's mother sat by the fire and nodded her head. "I have never heard of a greater danger, except once." Now Sigurdsson, the King of Lachlan, slapped his thigh and bawled with laughter. "By the beard of my God, Coddle, a fine tale was that, and by it you've earned the life of your youngest son. But if you had a second tale to tell, and it was of the equal of it, you could earn the soul of your middle son." "Well, the truth is, I can tell you how I was in a more difficult situation than that." And I don't just mean the time that Derry and Callie left for a week and Elder and I messed up the library and we had to face their wrath. No, this was more than that even. Well, tell away then, invited the King of Lochlan. You see, it was when I was a young lad, out hunting on my father's lands. Chance had brought me to the seashore, where there were jagged rocks and undersea caves and the like, All were washed by the angry foam lips of the ocean god. When I came to the shore, I saw a trickle of smoke arising from between two rocks. Now that is strange, I thought to myself. What could be the meaning of that? I began to climb over the rocks, and in my curiosity towards the smoke, it so happened that I fell. As luck would have it, no bone of mine was broken, the skin not blemished by bruising, but I had fallen down a deep cleft of the rocks. Now how to get out with the sea tide approaching and the hollow filling with its surging flood was my first thought. It was a terrible thing to die from drowning. I knew that the sides of the cleft were too steep to climb. It was then that I heard a clattering sound. And who should it be but a giant leading a herd of goats with a buck at their head? You've heard of goats, of course. The giant's head popped over the rim, and he stared down at me with one great eye. "Hello, Colonel Colgway. My knife has been rusting a long time in its sheath, waiting for this tender flesh of a human boy. Well, it's not much of a meal you'll get from me," I shouted out, "for boys do not have much meat and are sinewy in the extreme. However, if you help me out, I can help you." The giant frowned. "Help me? How so?" "I have a gift for healing. I see you have but one eye. If you release me, I'll bestow on you the sight of the other eye, and admonish you not to play with laser pointers any more." Now the giant thought about this a moment, and then he nodded his agreement. "I will release you, Carl, but only after you've given me the sight in the other eye. Tell me what I must do. If it works, then I shall pull you out." Now that left me in difficulties, but I had no options but to pursue a plan. So I told him to prepare his giant cauldron, and light a fire under it, and boil water. And all the time my mind was working on how to achieve my freedom. With the water warming, I found some seaweed in the cleft, and I told the giant that he must dip the seaweed in the cauldron and rub it in his good eye before he rubbed it on the other. Thus I convinced him that the sight of the good eye would be passed to the other eye. In fact, I knew the property of the seaweed well enough, and knew that it would take the sight from the good eye and not give sight to the second eye. Now when this happened, the giant was in a fearful rage. He stood, blind completely, but threatening over the cliff where I was trapped, and he said what I would never get out of it. Or if he caught me, I would be put in his cauldron and boiled to make my flesh tender enough for his appetite. Now this was no good for me, for I had hoped to escape while he was blinded. So all through the night I crouched in the cleft out of his reach, holding my breath at times in case he heard me. When it was dawn, the giant finally dropped off to sleep, and I managed to climb out of the cleft. But I climbed into a pen in which he had put his goats, and it was difficult to get out of that pen when the goats started to shift and make a noise, so the giant woke up. You've heard of goats, of course. "Are you still asleep, boy?" called the giant down to the cleft, for he was still blind. Then he paused to listen. No, you're no longer in that cleft, are you? You're out among my goats." Now seeing him approach, I killed the buck goat and began to skin it for dear life. The giant paused, frowning. "It's one of my goats that you're killing?" "Not I. It is true that I am in the pen with your goats, but I am trying to release a goat whose rope had become too tight around her neck." So saying, I released one of the goats and let her out. The giant, feeling about, felt the goat, caught her, fondling the goat. "It is true what you say, boy. I feel the goat, but I cannot see her. Her rope is loose." I kept letting the goats out, one at a time, and the giant, feeling each, let them go. Finally, I put on the skin of the buck goat, and on hands and knees I began to crawl out of the gate, away from the pen, between the legs of the giant. The giant reached down and put a hand on my head and felt the horns of the buck and ran his fingers down my back, feeling the skin. "Well, that is my buck alive and well. Where are you, boy?" Outside the pen I roared. "Here I am, out and free in spite of ye." There was joy on me in my boasting. The giant sat down abruptly and great with sadness on his face. "You brought me to ruin, boy. I cannot help but admire you. In token of your victory, I shall give you a ring of mine. And if worn, this ring will do you naught but good. Here is the ring." The giant pulled the ring from his pocket and held it up. I smiled skeptically, for I was a wise child, perhaps not as wise as a brown horse, but wise nonetheless. Do you throw your ring to me, for I will not come near you and be caught, giant. That's no problem, said the giant, and he threw the ring across the sands. I went forward and picked it up. It was a fine ring of silver. I admired its craftsmanship. I slipped it on my own little finger of my left hand. Does the ring fit you? Inquired the giant anxiously. It fits well enough, I assured him. Then the giant cried, Where are you, ring? And the ring answered back, Here I am. The giant rose and came running towards the speaking ring. Now I realized what dire straits I was in, and I struggled to tear the ring from my little finger, but it would not come off. Every time the giant asked, Where are you, ring? It would ring out with, I am here. I was in such a bad extremity then that I knew only one escape. I took out my skein douve. I took the knife and I cut off the little finger of my left hand in which I had placed the ring. I then threw it far out over the cliffs into the boundless ocean. The giant lumbered past. Where are you, ring? I am here, answered the ring from the depths of the ocean. The giant sprang over the cliff towards the sound of the voice and fell into the sea. It was a pleasing sight to see him drowning. I was able to return home with a herd of goats, without the buck I'd slain, of course. There was great joy in my parents when I returned. The mother of the King of Lachlan, sitting by the fire, nodded in appreciation. I have never heard of a more dangerous situation, except once, she observed. Oh, it's a good tale, remarked the King of Lachlan to me. And the proof of it is here, replied Connell, holding out his hand. For as you observe, I lack a finger on which the ring was. I see you lack a finger, so that you have spoken truly. I will reply in truth as well. But by this tale you have saved the life of your second son. Only your eldest son will be hanged tomorrow. However, if you have a third tale to tell me, of a harder situation than facing the death of your eldest son, and can convince me of it, and can tell it in the next 2 minutes before the top of the hour, I shall release him to you as well. Well, it so happens, King of Lachlan, that I have. It happened when I was a young man. My father found me a wife, and I was married. One day I was out to hunt, and I came to a loch. Now in the loch was a little island, and I saw game aplenty upon it. I wandered around the loch, looking for a means of getting across, and on the bank I found a boat, that is. I took a step inside, and before I'd lifted the other leg into it, it took to the waves and sped towards the island in the middle of the loch. I could not believe that I had landed so swiftly on the island. I stepped ashore, and I found that a mist had come down, obscuring everything. I turned back to the boat, and it too had vanished, and so I went on to find shelter, but there was no shelter at all. The woods had gone, there was nothing but scrub and shrub. I suddenly saw an old cabin among this wilderness, and there was a patch of clear weather around it. Before the cabin stood a cauldron hanging over a fire. Seated outside was a woman with a naked baby on her knee, and she held a knife in her hand. She was putting the knife to the throat of the baby, and the baby was laughing in her face. Then the woman dropped the knife to the ground and began to cry. Her sobs were so heart-rending they sent cold shivers up and down my back. What ails you, woman? She caught sight of me and started, Who are you? How came you here? And so I told her the truth of it. It was the same with myself. I came with my child. Your child? Why were you putting a knife to its throat then? She gave a low sob. Do you see that cauldron? Well, the cauldron and the fire belong to an evil wizard. The wizard has told me I must put my baby in the cauldron and boil it for the wizard's meal by the time he returns. I peered around. Where is this wizard? No, not far away, gathering herbs for the pot. Can you not escape? No more than you can. The boat's under the wizard's control, and we're not returning to the mainland. What if you refuse? The wizard has sworn to put me in the cauldron instead. Just then we heard the footsteps of the wizard returning. The woman began to sob. Hide the baby behind those trees. I instructed her, and while she did so, I went to the cauldron and tested the water. Now, as luck would have it, the woman had neglected to keep the fire heated, and so the water was only lukewarm. I will step into the pot, I told her, and do you put the cover of the pot over it while I'm inside. And so it was I stepped into the lukewarm water, and the woman placed the lid on the cauldron. Then the wizard came along. Ho, woman! Have you boiled that child for me yet? He's still in the pot, sir. He's not done yet. I raised my voice, and I cried from inside the cauldron. My dear, it's boiling, I am. Whereupon the wizard laughed heartily. Then you shall soon be done. And I heard him heaping wood under the cauldron, and began to grow hot. I was sure that I would soon scald to death, but the wizard, as luck would have it, fell asleep by the fire. As soon as he was snoring, the woman came across and raised the lid. "Is it alive, you are?" I stood up with face red and wet. "Barely." I climbed out of the cauldron as carefully as I could, and I ran to the stream to cool myself, but I scalded the palms of my hands where I gripped the rim of the cauldron. "How can we kill the wizard?" I asked. The woman, whispering, told me that nothing could kill the wizard except his own spear, which he wore slung across his back. So I went to him, and I slowly began to withdraw the spear out. His snoring breath was powerful, so powerful that at every intake, as I bent over him drawing the spear, he drew me close. It took a while to loosen the spear. Finally I had it in my hand. But I was a warrior. I could not kill a sleeping man. So I bent forward and I gave him a prick in his face. He blinked and lifted his head. He stared at me, and in that second I cast his spear. It went right through him, and he fell dead on the ground. Then I took the woman and the child and went back to the boat. Because the wizard was dead, the boat no longer was possessed of magical powers, and so we were able to come safely back to shore. And I applaud both Dagmar and Rick for their restraint. Now the woman and her child went on their way, and I returned home to my wife and Gale. Now, that was a more dangerous situation than facing the death of my eldest son tomorrow, isn't it? The King of Lachlan slapped his thigh and shook his head. "Ho, that's a fine tale. But is there proof of that? Without proof, your son will hang." Before Connell could answer, the King of Lachlan's mother leaned forward. "Show me the palms of your hands, Connell Crogabwe." And so Connell did, showing the healed, scalded skin whose tissue had turned to a yellow color, which had earned him his nickname of the Yellow Hand. "And so, it is you, Connell, who were there, "That I was." "That I was too. I was the woman who was a prisoner of the wizard, and that baby you saved is none other than my son who now sits on the throne of Lochlan." Then Connell and Sigurdsson seized each other in joy and embraced. "Well, good it is, Connell Crogway, that you have come through all these hardships. Better it is that you saved my life and that of my mother. I give you back the life of your third son, and this I add to it. You may take with you, on your return to Fotla, the Yoch Don, my brown horse. And this I add to that. You may take a sack of gold as a token of our friendship." And so it was that the next day Connell and his 3 sons embarked for the kingdom of Fotla, with the Yoch Don, the brown horse, and a sack of gold. And he returned first to his home, and he gave the sack of gold to his wife. Then he went to the king of Fotla, and he gave the brown horse to him. And the king of Fotla vowed he would be a friend to Connell thereafter, and moreover, Connell's 3 sturdy sons learnt the wisdom of prudence and sobriety, and were never again given to impetuosity. You've just heard a selection of Scottish legends. Thank you for listening to StoryLink Radio. If you like what you've just heard, we hope you will subscribe to our podcast and pass along our web address, www.storylinkradio.com. Be sure to visit our website for show notes, to find out how to join our live audience, and for lots of free stuff, including free audiobooks and much more. Join us next time for another story from StoryLink Radio.